So hello, Jim, how are you?
Great, and how are you, Macarena?
Very fine, thank you. I'm very happy to have you here in CPTED Talks. Thank you for your availability. How is everything there in the United States?
Well, everything's going great. I mean, I think we're starting to see some progress in the vaccination program and also in businesses reopening, restaurants reopening. I think there's an energy now that people have, and hopefully it's not going to be a setback because of some crazy things that people are doing.
Oh, we hope the same here in the South American region. And I'm happy to hear that, Jim. If you may, I will start reading a little about your biography so the audience know more about you.
Okay.
It's okay? Perfect. So Jim Peters is considered a leading authority on legal and social trends impacting the hospitality industry and development of hospitality and entertainment districts. Prior to founding the Responsibility Hospitality Institute, his experience and education includes over 20 years of operations, consulting, expert testimony, and training for the hospitality industry. Additionally, Peters has organized and administered numerous conferences, symposia, and forums involving national and international experts. He has organized and facilitated coalitions at the local, state, and national levels, and has served as both speaker and facilitator for numerous conferences worldwide. Wow, your curriculum is so long, Jim. So this was a brief resume. But let's start from the beginning. How did you know about CPTED?
Well, I began to work in San Diego back in the mid-1990s, and that was when you had, President Clinton, who established the Regional Community Policing Training Institutes. And as a part of that, I became aware of not just the CPTED approach, but also the SARA approach to policing. And so that's when I first learned about it. And then the first time I met you was when I went to the conference in Calgary. There was somebody who was supposed to speak there, but he wasn't able to come. So he asked me to fill in for him. And I guess that was a real milestone breakthrough because I had an opportunity to meet you and then to learn more about the work that you do.
Yes, Jim, it was a great time there in Calgary in the International CPTED Association conference. And it was great to meet you. And we start a nice professional relationships. And now here we are. Yeah. We are just facing an incredible event. You will describe the Sociable Summit further in this interview. But I am very happy because we met in Calgary that time. And now, with all the information you have about CPTED, what is the role you think or relevance of CPTED applied in nightlife districts?
Well, as I began to learn more about CPTED and as I, attended the conferences, I began to realize that much of the CPTED philosophy and approach was being applied more to residential areas or, business, commercial, complex areas, really looking at some of the environmental aspects. And I felt that there was not a whole lot that was focusing it specifically on nightlife, and not just nightlife in terms of the district with lighting and mobility and movement of people, but also internally, when you had the interior space and how you manage the flow of people and how you reduce risks of assault or sexual harassment and other things that often happen. So I think as I began to study CPTED more, I began, and working with you in particular, especially when we did that tour in Toronto, we began to see things differently as it relates to nightlife districts.
Yeah, you're right. Completely agree. And our projects were very exploratory projects, very interesting what we did in Toronto, in Calgary. Then we met in Mexico, also in the United States. So the nice issue is that we can apply CPTED in different nightlife districts in different countries. It's a very global methodology. But last year we started the COVID crisis all around the world. It is something that is super difficult, and it changed all the behaviors from in nightlife district also. What do you think about that? Can you describe a little the challenges nightlife districts are facing with the COVID crisis?
Well, I think that when you look at nightlife, you have a continuum of people who go out. We talk about singles, mingles, families, and jingles. So singles are young, unattached people, and they tend to seek out places to really show themselves off. It's really kind of a mating, a ritual that happens. And so the large disco, nightclubs, dance clubs are all designed for that young adult. Then as people get older, they want to have more social spaces where they could sit and eat and drink. They have more money to spend. They want better entertainment, and often will move and migrate to festivals. Then you have families who have limited mobility in terms of nightlife, but still want places to go that are safe for them and their children. And then finally, you have the jingles, which are like me, older adults, empty nesters, business travelers, convention travelers, and they tend to have the more disposable income. So COVID has more dramatically influenced or impacted businesses that depend upon tourism and conventions. Whereas the neighborhood establishments where they're allowed to have some outdoor seating or open even on a limited way can still have the local patrons that have always been there with them. But I think the biggest impact will be those that depend more on the tourism and conventions, which may not come back, especially international travel, probably until 2022 in any significant way. The other thing about COVID is the impact on employees and the risks that they face, even when businesses were allowed to open, because those that are most likely to engage in risky behavior tend to be the younger adults, and the people who are more prone to be cautious tend to be older. But now you're beginning to see with the vaccination program kind of a surge in the over 60, not only in terms of going out where they have that opportunity, but also what some refer to as revenge travel, where they feel I'm vaccinated, I could get on a plane, I could go anywhere I want to, I've been saving my money. And so you're going to start to see that first wave trickle out. But as we've seen this week in Miami Beach, you still have that young adult who seems impervious to COVID, and it's going to be a long time before many of them get the vaccine, well, at least from their perspective. It may not be till the summer, but they're engaging in riskier behavior. So I think what we've learned from COVID is that hospitality and the need for people to socialize face to face rather than online, what I call three-dimensional sociability versus two-dimensional sociability, is what people recognize now as the greatest loss. So while you have the loss of jobs among the people who work in the industry, and the tax revenue and all of the tangential industries, like the paper companies and the beer companies and the food companies and the pest control and waste management companies, they're all impacted as well. And we don't really look at the delivery person who brings the linens to the restaurant as losing their job. So there's a lot of expanded impacts that go beyond just the bars and the restaurants. And I think it's going to take a long time for them to come back again. A lot of people have been laid off. A lot of people have found other work. They're having a hard time finding security people to work in nightclubs. So even if nightclubs can open, they may not be able to staff it properly. So then you increase your risk. And this gets back to your CPTED. If businesses are opening up, they're going to have crowds of people that have been pent up and probably engage in risky drinking behavior and activity. And you're going to have limited availability of security staff. So I think CPTED has to take into consideration all of these dynamics in terms of figuring out ways in which to manage nightlife. And when you get out onto the street, because of a lot of the demonstrations, particularly in the US, against the police, a lot of police may not necessarily be available to work in nightlife districts. or their role may be changed significantly. So even introducing CPTED with policing when they're pulling back from working in nightlife districts will be one of the other kind of outcomes that might take years to recover from.
You're completely right, Jim. And the environment is getting more complex, and also CPTED is evolving. We started with CPTED first generation in the 70s. Then in year 2000, we start CPTED second generation, considering all the social architecture from communities. But now we are entering the third generation CPTED that has much to do with liability in spaces and also public health. So I think it goes hand by hand with this complex phenomena of the COVID crisis and nightlife districts. And we will discuss much about these topics in the Sociable Summit next month. Please, can you describe a little about this relevant global event?
Well, we've been holding events since 1984, but this series of summits, which has been particularly oriented to public safety, began in 2015. And then over the years, we've helped nurture the idea that cities need an organized office of nightlife and culture, as well as dedicated staff that would work as a liaison. So our summits have become the mechanism for particularly North American cities that are seeking to build these types of offices and staffing so that you have people who understand the complexity of the issue. Our summit tends to touch upon emerging issues. So this one, we're going to be talking a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusivity. We're going to talk about what we call the queer nightlife, the LGBT plus community, and what impacts not only COVID, but the loss of nightlife for that population. In particular, we have a session about women in hospitality, particularly women working in hospitality. And along the lines of your CPTED work, Leisha's done a lot of research and begun to do some interviews about what women want. And she did this before COVID, but now she's come up with really a comprehensive list. And I think the future from a CPTED perspective will be, how do you not only create a district, but a venue that make women feel safe? Because women will be the determining factor as to how quickly nightlife comes back. The young adult population that tends to go out is really just a small part of hospitality and nightlife. And that's not where the big money is. It's the older adults. And they'll be the ones that remain cautious even after the vaccination program. And we've learned to avoid people. We've learned to be suspicious of everybody. So when people walk down the street, everybody is a potential person that's going to infect me. And I think our behaviors have led to this people avoidance rather than engagement. So our conference really tries to bring together representatives from public health, alcohol regulation, hospitality associations, people who are involved in nighttime management, whether they be in business improvement districts or they're part of an office of nightlife. Obviously, we have a large continuum of police that come, representatives who are frontline sergeants and lieutenants and commanders and captains that really on a day-to-day have to figure out how to manage the trends.
That sounds very attractive and interesting. Many topics to be addressed. So congratulations for that. Just today, I had a chat with Alicia Scholler from your team about the safety perception of women in nightlife districts. And we chat a little about her research. And I told Alicia that I will talk about that in my CPTED lecture in your summit. So I will focus mostly about women in nightlife districts and her perception of safety. It's a very interesting topic. And do you think after the crisis, you spoke about 2022, do you think nightlife districts will be more resilient? We will learn from the challenges?
Well, I grew up and I got my early life in the 1970s working at a music venue in New York. And that's when my generation was turning 18 and turning 21. And you had that whole disco, large occupancy venue. And this was perhaps true with the millennials, those born, after 1984, after that were really part of that generation of people who came of age in 2000. And that's where you saw the reemergence of those large occupancy venues. But even before COVID, you began to see those types of venues losing to the big festivals. So that young adult who used to go out 2 or 3 times a week were saving their money to go out to one big festival, instead of spending $125 going out, 3 or 4 times a week, they save that money and go to some big festival. So you already began to see, both with the liability insurance, the cost of security, the threats of active shooters in nightclubs, a lot of those large venues were having difficulty. And until such time as people feel more comfortable, you'll probably see, and this is what most people I talk to, more of a neighborhood focus, that people will start to patronize businesses that are close to them and that are much more controlled and managed and comfortable. There'll always be a space for the nightclub because you'll always have that young adult who needs that kind of a space. But I think they've also learned to have more home entertainment and more home
Mm,
socializing. And so those will be the competition that businesses will have to face. You'll have a surge, obviously, just because you're letting people out. But I think over time, they'll take a step back and say, do I really want to go to a crowded nightclub every
mm,
night? Or do I want to have parties in my home where I have this nice entertainment system and I could make drinks and I've learned how to order food from restaurants? So you see a lot
mm.
of competitive forces that may change the dynamics going forward.
That sounds very, very interesting. And I can imagine the shift, the change of what we will see in the future. It's interesting. And also, I think that CPTED will go hand by hand with that change, with that shift. Do you think the International CPTED Association, the institution that I lead globally, can help a lot in this shift of paradigm? For example, we can promote some more events about nightlife districts or do some more joint venture with your institute?
Well, naturally, I'd always like to continue to work with you, and we could have you as a promotional partner. We'll have a special web page that you could add videos or links, or you could customize it just to promote CPTED. So I will send you that information if you help to get the word out about our summit. And we have a really reduced rate. We have to obviously collect some revenue, but we have some good sponsorship this year, and we're able to make it more accessible to people. But I'll make sure that we line you up to be one of the promotional partners and get you on our app now that people will all have access to on their phones or on their desktop. There'll be a
That's
special
great.
page dedicated to your association.
That's great, Jim. Thank you for the opportunity. And can you remember me the dates so the audience knows we are talking about which dates?
Yeah, it's April 26th through the 28th. It's 3 days, but they're short days, unlike a regular conference where you'd go from 8 to 5. We're really having pretty much like a 4-hour block. And we're doing a lot of short sessions, like your session is a half an
Mm.
hour. We have some panel discussions, again, with one of your mentors, Daryl Stevens, is going to be on a session. But we're trying to introduce what we call the bite-sized sessions so that it'll give people like yourself an opportunity to give a short presentation and not have to have a lot of panelists or where you can be more concise in what you present and have
Mm.
more dialogue and interaction. So we have a lot of different formats and a lot of different opportunities for people to network. We're going to create what we call trend spotting forums where it'll just be online chats where people can talk about a particular topic or issue that they feel is important, and the app itself allows for a lot of networking.
Mm. Yes, the app is great. So all the format of your summit is very, very interactive, very dynamic, and being digital, it connects with so many communities all around the world. This is a benefit. So congratulations for that. And as closing remarks, Jim, do you want to highlight some ideas for the audience?
Well, I do believe getting back to what will happen is all going to be shaped by the women. I mean, women are obviously emerging as political leaders in the world. They obviously have gained a lot of economic power. I think a lot of the focus on sexual harassment and sexual assault has created a way for women to be much more comfortable. And I think in a lot of ways, COVID has also established that distance. We have to remain distant and not touching and all those types of things that in a club or in a nightlife venue, women found uncomfortable or offensive. I think it'll be easier now for people to accept that distance that they need, and that'll create a more comfortable environment, not only for the women but for the men, because it'll just create a much more sensitive experience for everybody.
Thank you for your reflection. It's very interesting, and I agree with you. I think this is a time, bueno, for everyone, but also women's sensitivity or perception is very needed. So it's a very good spot and opportunity to invite women to raise their voices and be an active part of the diagnosis, design, and implementation of strategies for safe nightlife districts. So thank you so much, Jim, for this interview, and we will keep in touch, and much luck and success in your summit.
Okay, well, thank you, Macarena.